Hey, it's Jess. Welcome back. Today I'm here with another Way Back Wednesday where I will be talking about all the books that I read in May of 2021. Looking at my Goodreads, I read 8 books in the month of May. One of them was a reread, the other 7 were new to me. The first book I read was Glory in Death by J.D. Robb. This is the second book in the In Death series by J.D. Robb. This is also the pen name for Nora Roberts. The In Death series is more of like a crime detective series versus I think she normally writes like romance. I don't know. I've never read anything by Nora Robb. I've only read things by J.D. Robb. In this book, you are continuing to follow Eve Dallas. She is a homicide detective. It is the year 2058, so in the future. And as with the first one, there have been deaths of 2 beautiful women. They were suspicious deaths. And so she's trying to figure out who murdered these women. And in the first book, you met Rourke, he's like a big millionaire. He was a suspect in the first book. He's a suspect in this book. Basically, probably going to be a suspect in almost all the books. The difference is, although you met Rourke in the first book, he and Eve have kind of fallen in love and started a relationship. So this book, she has to wrestle with the dilemma of finding the murderer. What if it is him, the person that she's in love with, and everything like that. I did not like this book as much as I liked the first book. But I was reading reviews on it today when I was going back and kind of looking at the synopsis. And a lot of people have recently reread these books and said that they ended up liking this better on the second read. The next book I read in May was The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher. This is the first T. Kingfisher book that I had ever read. I had been hearing a lot about her on YouTube and wanted to check her stuff out. So I found this one at the library and I grabbed it. T. Kingfisher is actually a pen name for Ursula Vernon, and I've never read anything by her, but I have read a lot of things by T. Kingfisher. I've read almost all of her horror books. I've read quite a few of her fantasy books too. She is quickly becoming one of my favorite authors. In The Hollow Places, you are following Kara, who recently divorced from her husband and has moved in with her eccentric uncle Earl. And Earl owns a tourist hotspot called the Glory to God Museum of Natural Wonders, Curiosities, and Taxidermies. That's really hard for me to say. Kara has taken over kind of running the museum while her uncle is out. She is staying in a bedroom like at the top of the museum. There's a coffee shop next door. She becomes friends with the barista there named Simon. One night, Kara is at the shop and hears something downstairs, so she goes to investigate it, and she finds a hole in the wall behind a painting. And when she goes through this hole, I think there's like a long corridor, and she ends up in this other world that is basically a bunch of different islands, and there's creatures there. And so she comes back and keeps getting cryptic messages such as they can hear what you're thinking, pray they are hungry, very creepy things. And she and Simon go back into the world, and I think they're trying to figure out how to close the portal or something. I don't really remember. I've only read this once, but it is probably my favorite of T. Kingfisher's horror books. There's a scene in here that I think about way too much. It was very creepy. I really liked the atmosphere. I fell in love with her writing. And if you have read some of her other stuff and maybe didn't enjoy it, I highly recommend checking out The Hollow Places. It's definitely, again, my favorite of her horror books. The next book I read in May was A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. This is the 4th novel in the Court of Thorns and Roses series, but it's technically the 5th book because there was a small little novella called A Court of Frost and Starlight that came out before this one. That was kind of just an interlude following Feyre and Rhysand and everybody. In A Court of Silver Flames, you are following Nesta. I know a lot of people don't like Nesta. She's actually pretty divisive. A lot of people really like her. A lot of people really hate her. So some people don't jive with this book. I have a friend that has tried to read it like 3 times. She can't get through it. So I went into it knowing that it was about Nesta, but it had recently come out. I was definitely in my ACOTAR phase, so I wanted to read it and check it out. In this book, like I said, you are following Nesta. She is kind of like trapped in this mountain with 1,000 stairs in the middle of this city. I think the city's Valerian. Valaris? I think it's Valaris. Again, haven't read this book since then. And she can't get down from the mountain castle thing because there's a bajillion and a half steps and she's not strong enough to make it down all the steps. Everyone else who has come to the castle has wings, and so they fly her up there. And they fly other people up there. That's why they're able to get up there. In this book, so you're following Nesta. Cassian comes, teaches her how to fight. She befriends these like nuns that are in the library that are also in this mountain thing. I don't really remember. This is one of the spicier books. Like, they keep getting spicier and spicier. I think this is the one that definitely like cemented ACOTAR in being an adult fantasy series and not a young adult, because again, they get spicier and spicier. ACOTAR is not my favorite series by Sarah J. Maas. I haven't read any of these books again. I don't really remember a lot about A Court of Silver Flames. I remember that it was way too long and seemed unnecessary to me. I know she's writing more books. I'm assuming the next book in this series is going to be about Elaine, which is another of Feyre's sisters, but I don't know. Anyway, I read this one and I haven't gone back to it, and I don't really think about it. I don't really know what else to say about this book. It was just average for me. The third book I read in May was Mockingjay by Suzanne Collins. This is the third book in the Hunger Games trilogy. In this book, you are following Katniss after she has been broken out of the arena at the end of Catching Fire. She wakes up and discovers that District 13 is still around. They have just gone underground. And this is really hard for Katniss. She has a bunch of rules she has to follow. She's not allowed to go outside. She's apart from Peeta because he was stolen by the Capitol during the breakout. And it's just a really hard time for her. And then Plutarch Heavensbee decides to make her the symbol of hope and rebellion, the Mockingjay, for District 13 and the other districts going against the Capitol. So in the end, they infiltrate the Capitol, they start the rebellion. It all wraps up in a nice big bow. This is not my favorite Hunger Games book. In fact, I reread the Hunger Games trilogy last summer, and I didn't even read Mockingjay. I know enough of how it ends. I don't like it. I don't really care for the movies. I don't like the ending. I hate the epilogue. And I know she's come out and defended herself, but I don't know. Mockingjay, it's just not my favorite. And I read it to complete the trilogy, and that's about all I have to say about it. It wraps it up nicely, I guess. The next book I read was The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I think that's how you say his last name. I'm not quite sure. I had heard about this all over BookTube, so again, got it from my library, decided to read it. In it, you are following a woman in she's in a psychiatric hospital, and she has been accused of murdering her husband. And since she was picked up and arrested for that, she has not spoken a single word. And you are following a new therapist who has come in and trying to get her to speak and trying to learn her story. At the time that I read it, I really enjoyed this book. And the twist to me was like, whoa! Because it's a thriller, so you know there's going to be a twist in it. I've heard other people talk about this, and they didn't enjoy it quite as much. A lot of them said they figured out the twist. I didn't, but I don't go into thriller books trying to figure out twists. If it's like a murder mystery, I don't try to figure out who the murderer was. I just read for entertainment. And at the time, I was very entertained by this book. I finished it very quickly, and I haven't picked up any of his other books, but I've been interested in them. So maybe I'll do that later this year, but so far The Silent Patient is the only one of his books that I've read. The next book I read was Scarlet by Marissa Meyer. This is the second book in the Lunar Chronicles. The first book is Cinder, which was loosely based on Cinderella. This one, Scarlet, is loosely based on Red Riding Hood. In this book, you are following Scarlet, and her grandmother is missing. So she is traveling to her grandmother's place, I think it's a farm, to try to find her, find out what happened to her. And along the way, she meets Wolf, who is a street fighter, who says that he has information about her grandmother. And so they are traveling, trying to find her grandmother, and Scarlet discovers that there is a bunch of secrets that grandmother was hiding that she didn't know about. And eventually they get hooked up with Cinder. They're trying to start a rebellion, I think, is what happens. I really liked this book, but I have not read any more of the Lunar Chronicles. There's 4, maybe 5. I know the next one's about Rapunzel. It's called Cress, and I've picked it up like 3 times and haven't ever read it. So I'd like to read the Lunar Chronicles again. I talked about this when I talked about Cinder in one of my other Way Back Wednesday videos. So it's just on my list of series that I've started that I want to finish, but I need to reread the first 2 again because I don't remember what's going on. But I did like this. I do want to continue finishing it. And I don't know. I just never finished it, which again, it's starting to become apparent that that's a habit of mine. The next book I read was The Tyrant's Tomb by Rick Riordan. This is the 4th book in the Trials of Apollo. In this book, you are continuing to follow the god Apollo. He has been turned into a human by Zeus because of his children's participation in the last final battle that was in the Heroes of Olympus series. So Apollo's being punished. His name was Lester Papadopoulos, I think. And he has traveled across the country. He has to reunite or revive the 5 oracles. And once he does that, his father Zeus will turn him back into the god Apollo. So in this book, the 4th one, he is traveling to Camp Jupiter. So he meets all of the Roman gods and their children, the demigods for them, and has to go into, he has to fight 3 emperors, but he has to go into, I think that's probably the culmination of this. In the last book, he fights the 3 emperors, but in this one, he has another side quest that he has to do. I don't really remember what it is. Again, have not finished this series. This is the last book in the series I read, even though there's only one left. This year, hopefully, I will finish this series again. I recently reread Percy Jackson, so this year I want to read The Heroes of Olympus, and then I'll read Trials of Apollo and finish this series up. But I really like this. I love Rick Riordan's writing. I love the world of Percy Jackson, and I have no excuse why I didn't pick the last one up. I think it's because it wasn't out at the time when I picked up The Tyrant's Tomb, and then I just got busy and forgot to check back in on it. I'm pretty sure that's probably what happened, but I am going to read it. It's a goal of mine to finish this series. The last book I read in May was The Twisted Ones by T. Kingfisher. After I had read The Hollow Ones, I went back to the library and saw that this book was also there. I believe that this was her horror debut. In The Twisted Ones, you are following Mouse. Her grandmother has recently passed away, and she has been tasked with clearing out her grandmother's house. And her grandmother was a hoarder, so there was stuff everywhere in this house. So Mouse and her dog go to this house, and while there, she finds her step-grandfather's journal, which seems to be filled with just random nonsense rants. And then she keeps reading, and she sees this poem or paragraph about these things called the Twisted Ones. And it sounds really creepy. And so she's trying to navigate cleaning out the house, figuring out what these Twisted Ones are. She finds stuff in the woods around. Also, the house is in the middle of the woods. There's one neighbor family, but they're pretty far away. They're across the road and up a little bit. Anyway, she has to figure out what these twisted ones are. This one, another T. Kingfisher, man, she just has such descriptive writing. There is another scene in this that I read and I was like, ugh, so scared. It was so scary. And again, still think about that scene a lot. I did not like this one as much as I liked The Hollow Places. It was, again, so descriptive. I loved the characters. I just didn't really like the ending and kind of the explanation of everything. It wasn't my favorite, but I did enjoy it. It was super creepy. I do think about it a lot. And again, if you haven't read anything by T. Kingfisher, highly recommend you pick something up by her. I love The Twisted Ones and I love The Hollow Places. I think both of those would be great places to start if you're looking into reading her horror things. And those are all the books that I read in May of 2021. A pretty good reading month. Again, at the time, I didn't love Glory and Death. I may like it now if I reread it again. I don't really like Mockingjay, but I already knew that. The rest of the books I really enjoyed when I read them. And yeah, some of them I definitely would like to revisit and read again. But now I want to know, have you read any of these books? What did you think? All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye.